The cameras rolled inside the glittering international broadcast studio. Giant LED panels glowed with maps of Africa and America. News tickers flashed headlines. The world was watching. U.S. President Donald Trump sat confidently in front of a glowing screen, fingers steepled, suit sharp, voice booming. With a hard stare, he leaned into the microphone and delivered a chilling command. President Ibrahim Traoré must step down immediately. If he doesn't, ECOWAS will face severe U.S. sanctions. The room froze. The panel, composed of diplomats, journalists, and global leaders, shifted in stunned silence. Cameras zoomed in. The African delegation clenched their jaws, their pride bruised. But then, President Maada Bio of Sierra Leone, newly elected ECOWAS chairman, shifted in his seat. Slowly he reached for his earpiece, adjusted his glasses, and rose. The camera panned to him. His voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Mr. Trump, you can't control Africa. Face your own chaos in America." Gasps filled the studio. Trump's face hardened. The lights seemed to dim slightly. And in that moment, something had shifted in the global air. Something irreversible. This wasn't just a political broadcast anymore. It was history unfolding live. Back in Burkina Faso, Captain Ibrahim Traoré watched the broadcast in quiet stillness from a modest, heavily guarded room. No golden chairs, no red carpets, just a wooden desk, a single screen, and a cup of tea left untouched. His advisors stood behind him, tense. His face was unreadable. When Trump's threat played again, Traoré must step down. The room shook with emotion. One of his aides slammed a hand on the table. "Sir, this is an insult, an attack on our sovereignty." But Traoré raised one calm hand. No. His eyes stayed locked on the screen, where Maada Bio had just delivered his reply. "You can't control Africa. Face your own chaos in America." Traoré's lips twitched slightly. Not a smile, but something close to it. A flicker of hope, maybe, or gratitude. Outside, the streets of Ouagadougou were alive. Crowds had gathered at cafes and rooftops, watching the live stream on their phones, their voices hushed, fists clenched. For the first time in a long while, they felt seen. The people weren't just waiting for what would happen next. They were hoping. And somewhere, deep inside Traoré's silence, a storm was forming. The studio lights gleamed too bright now. The American anchor tried to regain control. "Let's remain civil." But Trump cut in, voice rising. "You're making a grave mistake. ECOWAS depends on U.S. aid. That aid ends today if Traoré stays in power." The threat echoed like thunder. President Maada Bio didn't blink. He slowly removed his earpiece, stood fully upright, and placed both hands on the desk. His voice was steady, his accent rich, his presence unshakable. "Africa is not your playground. We will not trade our dignity for dollars." A woman in the panel, a journalist from Ghana, whispered, "Did he just say that on live television?" But Maada wasn't done. He turned his gaze toward the camera and with piercing clarity added, "You bombed our countries, you funded dictators. Now you want to decide who leads us. Never again." The panel went completely silent. Somewhere off camera, a technician accidentally dropped a mic. The clink echoed like a gunshot. Donald Trump's jaw tightened. He tried to speak, but Maada held up a hand. "This isn't just about Traoré. It's about the soul of a continent." And as millions watched from every corner of the world, tears began to fall in homes across Africa. Backstage, a young intern named Amma, barely 23 from Ghana, stood frozen with a clipboard in hand. She had been tasked with monitoring guest time slots, but now her heart was pounding. She had just watched Maada Bio confront Donald Trump on live TV. A senior producer barked into a headset, "Cut to commercial," but no one moved, not even the cameraman. "Sir, we can't," Amma whispered. "The world is watching. If we cut now, we look like cowards." The control room fell silent. Trump's team, flustered, whispered among themselves. One of them gestured for the mic to be cut. But Amma leaned in and said quietly to her superior, "Let Africans speak, for once. Let the truth breathe." The producer paused. He nodded. The feed continued, raw and unedited. Across the continent, on rooftops and in crowded shops, old women wiped their eyes. Teenagers with earbuds stopped dancing. Farmers left their fields and gathered around dusty screens. Africa wasn't being spoken for anymore. It was speaking back. And for Amma, who grew up seeing leaders bow to Western pressure, something changed that day. Hope took root. A whisper had begun, a whisper that would soon become a roar. That night, Maada Bio's words circled the globe. Within hours, social media lit up with hashtags. Jos, Africa will not bow. Stand with Traoré. But back in Burkina Faso, something even deeper was happening. Children at a school in Bobo Dioulasso gathered after class. Their teacher, Madame Cissé, had recorded the broadcast. The students, some barefoot, some sharing benches, watched it wide-eyed. When Maada said, "You can't control Africa," one little boy turned to his classmate. "Why did he say that?" Madame Cissé knelt beside him. "Because for many years, others told us what to do, like we couldn't think for ourselves. But today, someone stood up for us." Across the country, handwritten letters began pouring into Ouagadougou. Some were just scribbles on paper scraps. Others were poems from children, elders, mothers. Some came from the diaspora, from France, Mali, Senegal. One simply said, "Tell Traoré not to step down. He is the only one who made us feel safe." Captain Traoré read everyone. Each letter added weight to his silence. Not fear, but duty. And behind that silence, a decision was forming. He knew this wasn't just about him anymore. It was about every African child who still slept hungry and dared to dream. The next morning, the summit continued. Trump arrived with a tighter security team and a colder stare. He barely acknowledged the panel. His message hadn't changed, but the room had. When Trump demanded once again that Traoré step down, a delegate from Senegal quietly stood and left. Then Nigeria, then Guinea. Within minutes, 8 African nations walked out of the studio. The world gasped. "We came to listen," said Liberia's representative, "not to be bullied." Trump slammed his fist on the table. "You'll regret this. You all depend on our aid." But before anyone could answer, a man in plain clothes entered the studio. No suit, no security. Captain Ibrahim Traoré. He had arrived. No warning. No script. He simply walked in, his face calm and proud. Every camera turned. Every breath held. Even Trump went quiet. Traoré didn't sit. He didn't smile. He just stood beside Maada Bio and said in soft, strong French, "You cannot starve a people who've already tasted freedom." And for the first time in that studio, even America had nothing to say. At 4:42 a.m., Ibrahim Traoré stood alone on the rooftop of the Burkina Faso embassy in Geneva. He hadn't slept. In his hand was a letter written by a 9-year-old girl named Sophie from a small village near Kaya. "Please don't let them remove you," she wrote in crooked handwriting. "You gave my school free lunch. My little brother didn't die because of you." Traoré closed his eyes. The wind carried the sounds of distant city traffic. But his heart was still in Africa. Inside the building, his chief of staff approached quietly. "Sir, the U.S. ambassador just requested a private meeting." Traoré didn't answer immediately. He tucked the letter into his jacket pocket and whispered, "They want me to bow. But it's the children who stand taller now." By sunrise, the world would know something no U.S. official expected. Traoré had prepared a response, not in anger, not with war, but with truth. And when it aired live that afternoon, Even some Americans would begin to cry. A special global broadcast was called. No shouting, no panels, no politics, just a single chair, one microphone, one leader. Captain Ibrahim Traoré sat down quietly. Across the world, tens of millions tuned in. Schools in Senegal paused lessons. Traders in Lagos stopped selling. Even busy New Yorkers glanced up at public screens. He looked straight into the lens. I was raised in a country where we were told not to dream big, that our skin meant silence and our soil meant hunger. But my people, they taught me something different. He paused. When you give a child clean water, they smile like the sun. When you give a mother peace, she prays for strangers. That's what leadership is, not gold, not threats. The camera cut to watch parties across Africa. Young people were crying. One woman whispered, "I never thought I'd live to hear a president speak like this." Traoré pulled out Sophie's letter and read it slowly. She said I saved her brother, but she saved me from forgetting who I serve. And just like that, the world didn't see a soldier anymore. They saw a father to a continent. Just as Traoré finished speaking, and the room sat in stillness, it happened. The live feed suddenly cut. The screens went black. In major cities like Accra, Lagos, Nairobi, crowds erupted in confusion. Phones buzzed. Broadcasters scrambled. In the studio control room, technicians shouted, "We've been hacked. Feed pulled down from Washington." The decision had come from a classified U.S. order, a last-minute attempt to stop the broadcast from sparking political unrest. But it was too late. Clips had already gone viral. TikToks, Twitter reposts, Telegram forwards, Facebook reels with millions of shares in under an hour. "This is the Africa we waited for," someone tweeted. "They cut the cameras, but they can't cut the truth." Back in the studio, Maada Bio slammed his fist on the table for the first time. "You want to shut our mouths? Then you will hear our silence loud enough to shake your walls." In the streets of Ouagadougou, the people didn't panic. They lit candles. A vigil began. And as a soft hymn rose under the stars, one message burned brighter than the rest. Let Traoré speak. He speaks for us all. That night, in the rural town of Koudougou, women gathered under a mango tree. Old radio playing. News static flickering. Babies tied to backs. Most of them had never been on a plane. Some never even left their village. But they knew the name Ibrahim Traoré. "He sent food during the drought," said one mother. "He gave us free medicine. Not even the French doctors did that," whispered another. They passed around a small phone with Traoré's video saved offline. When he spoke about the children, the tears came again. Then, an old woman, blind in one eye, took the phone, pressed it to her chest and said, "If they take this one from us, it will be like losing a son." In Washington, officials discussed freezing aid. In Africa, the people began writing letters in their own blood. They weren't just defending a man, they were defending dignity. And back in Geneva, Maada Bio was on a private call with Traoré. Voice trembling, he said, "Brother, they'll try everything now, even silence." But Traoré only replied, "Then we speak through our people." And that changed everything. Inside the United Nations headquarters in New York, urgent meetings took place behind closed doors. One document sat at the center of the table. U.S. Executive Sanctions Proposal, Burkina Faso Trade Suspension. If passed, it would cripple food imports, destroy currency value, and isolate Traoré completely. But as voting began, something unexpected happened. Togo refused to sign, then Namibia, then South Africa. One by one, African countries stood up. Ambassadors from Mali and Chad walked out of the meeting entirely. Outside, African college students held banners. "We are all Burkina Faso. Traoré is not alone." The UN chairwoman tried to calm the room. tension was too strong. Then, a voice came through the side door. It was ECOWAS President Maada Bio. He hadn't been invited to this meeting. He stood tall in a plain white caftan and said, "Before you sign that paper, go visit our villages. Watch a mother boil leaves for dinner. Then ask yourselves, who truly deserves to be punished?" The room went silent. No vote passed. The deal was broken. And for the first time in decades, Africa had said no, and the world had listened. For months the world had watched Traoré as a soldier, a leader, a voice. But no one had seen what happened this night. Alone in his room at the Geneva embassy, he sat at a desk full of letters, hundreds now. Piled beside a faded photo of his mother, he reached for one. A boy named Eliezer, age 8, from a refugee camp, wrote, "President, thank you. My uncle died in a war, but I want to grow up and protect people like you." Traoré's hands shook. For the first time in years, he cried. Not the cry of defeat, but the cry of burden, of carrying too much pain, of knowing that millions believed in him, and if he fell, they might fall too. He wept in silence, until a soft knock. Maada Bio entered holding tea. He saw the tears, said nothing, just sat beside him. Then he whispered, "They thought you were a soldier, Ibrahim, but you are the heart of this continent." And in that quiet room, filled with candlelight and memory, two African brothers prepared for the storm that was coming, a storm no one would expect, and no one would forget.
3 days after Traoré's emotional broadcast, the Geneva embassy received a coded warning. A private security report, traced from a NATO insider, warned of an active threat against Captain Ibrahim Traoré's life. No names, no fingerprints, just one chilling line. Silence him before his voice becomes a movement. Inside the embassy, chaos unfolded. Swiss guards doubled patrol. Maada Bio's security rushed in. For the first time, the two leaders were told to remain indoors. But Traoré refused. "If they kill me, let them do it in the light," he said. "But I will not run. I owe the people more than fear." News spread. Hashtags exploded. "Vache protect Traoré. We stand with Burkina." In Bobo Dioulasso, thousands marched barefoot, holding candles. A woman lifted her infant to the sky and cried, "You took Sankara, you won't take this one." The world began to tremble, not because of weapons, but because a continent had found its voice. And that voice wore no armor, just honesty and courage. Late at night, a private jet landed in Geneva. An elite U.S. envoy arrived, not to talk, but to end the story. Inside a sealed hotel room, he faced Maada Bio and Traoré with a final proposition. "Step down quietly. Return power. In exchange, we'll protect your legacy. Refuse, and your country will suffer more than sanctions." For a moment, silence. Then Traoré calmly placed Sophie's handwritten letter on the table. The envoy looked confused. "A girl from Kaya wrote this," Traoré said. "She said I gave her brother medicine. If I step down, who gives him the next one?" The envoy didn't blink. "That's not our concern." Maada Bio stood, hands trembling with quiet anger. "That is why Africa is still bleeding. You never saw us as human. You only come with deals, when we ask for dignity." The envoy rose and left. There was no handshake, no signature, only a moment of history, where two African men refused to be bought. And across the continent, as news leaked, children prayed for them by name. The next morning no alarms rang, but something had changed. In every major African city, from Dakar to Nairobi, Kinshasa to Ouagadougou, people poured into the streets. No one organized it. No one paid them. It came from pain, from a deep generational ache finally bursting through. Over 1 million people marched in silence. Mothers, veterans, university students, street vendors, teachers, orphans, Muslims and Christians, all united by one name, Ibrahim Traoré.
and one cry, "He will not fall, because we will not kneel." Even Western media couldn't ignore it. CNN ran the headline, "Africa defends its leader. Global shock as U.S. influence falters." In Geneva, Traoré watched live coverage, his voice barely a whisper. "I did not know. They loved me like this." Maada Bio placed a hand on his shoulder. "They don't just love you. You gave them something their fathers never had, a reason to be proud." And for the first time, Traoré smiled, not as a soldier, but as a man who knew he would never stand alone again.
In the heart of Ouagadougou, a young boy named Yakuba stood at the front of a crowd. He was only 10 years old, barefoot, with a tattered Burkina Faso flag tied like a cape around his shoulders. He held a sign written in charcoal, "Don't take away our future." A foreign journalist saw him and asked, "Why are you here?" Yakuba looked up and said, "Because President Traoré gave my mother seeds when our farm died. Because my sister eats in school now. And because no one protected us until him." The camera caught it all. That clip, just 13 seconds, went viral. Within hours, the story of Yakuba reached Geneva. Ibrahim Traoré watched it in silence. His hands trembled slightly. He stood up and walked to the window, staring out at a world that still didn't fully understand Africa. But now, for the first time in a long time, it listened. In that moment, Traoré made a quiet vow. "Even if I fall, I'll fall standing. Not for power, not for pride, but for Yakuba." The countdown to the next broadcast began, and this time the world would hear him roar. A full week after Trump's demand, the final broadcast aired. One studio, one light, one man. Captain Ibrahim Traoré sat at the center. No advisors, no script, no soldiers. He looked straight into the camera, then whispered, "I have no army behind me tonight. Just stories, just children, just a tired continent asking for space to breathe." Images began playing behind him. Clips of mothers in the market, kids in muddy schools, young doctors, farmers, barefoot boys with flags. "You told me to step down because I was inconvenient. But I was never fighting for a seat. I was fighting for respect." He paused, then held up Sophie's letter. Then Yakuba's flag. "If power means hurting these people, I don't want it. But if silence means watching them suffer, I'll never be quiet again." A tear slipped down his face. Across the world, millions cried with him. Even hardened journalists wiped their eyes. Even critics paused. Because for the first time, this wasn't politics. It was a man speaking from his soul. And no matter what came next, Africa would never forget. 2 days later, the U.S. quietly withdrew its threat. No press conference, no apology, just silence. But in Africa, something louder happened. In the streets of Freetown, Accra, Kigali, Bamako, people danced. Not for victory, but for dignity. At the Geneva airport, Maada Bio embraced Ibrahim Traoré tightly. "You didn't just defend Burkina Faso," he whispered. "You defended all of us." Traoré boarded a flight back home. When he landed, a sea of people stood waiting, mothers in tears, students holding sunflowers, old men singing freedom songs. Yakuba stood at the front, holding his flag. Traoré lifted him up. The boy wept in his arms. "You didn't let them take me," Yakuba cried. "You didn't let them take us." Traoré smiled and whispered, "Because you are the reason I stayed." That night, across Africa, candles burned in windows. Not for mourning, but for hope. My brothers and sisters across Africa and around the world. If this story touched your heart, if it made you cry, made you proud, or reminded you that we are more than what they see us as, please like, subscribe, and drop a comment below. Tell us, what does dignity mean to you? Your comment might be read by someone who needs hope today. Because some stories aren't just to be watched, they're meant to be felt. Let the world know Africa is rising, and no one can silence it again.